Your mind is never quiet. Even when you're resting, it's talking, analyzing, replaying, predicting, judging. Comma. You finish one thought and another replaces it immediately. And the most exhausting part isn't life itself. It's the constant noise inside your head. People call it overthinking. But that word doesn't fully explain it, because this isn't just thinking too much, it's your mind refusing to let go. You don't overthink because you're weak. You overthink because your mind is trying to protect you from pain, from regret, from uncertainty. The problem is, the mind was never designed to run nonstop. It was designed to solve problems, not to live inside them. So when there's no clear problem to solve, it creates one. It revisits conversations. It imagines worst-case scenarios. It judges past decisions. It rehearses future ones. Not because those thoughts are useful, but because silence feels unsafe. Most people are terrified of mental silence, because silence forces you to feel what distraction hides. Unprocessed emotions, unanswered questions, unresolved fears. So the mind fills the space with noise, and modern life feeds this perfectly. Notifications, deadlines, opinions, endless content. You're never allowed to mentally rest. Even when your body stops, your mind keeps going. This is why you feel tired even after sleeping. This is why rest doesn't feel restful. Because mental exhaustion doesn't come from doing too much, it comes from thinking without resolution. Psychology explains this as cognitive overload. Islam describes it as a heart that has lost stillness. Two different languages describing the same human struggle. Here's something most people don't realize. You don't need to stop thoughts. That's impossible. The goal is not silence. The goal is detachment. Because the problem isn't that thoughts appear. The problem is that you believe every thought is you. You think every thought deserves attention. It doesn't. Some thoughts are noise. Some are fear dressed as logic. Some are memories with no current purpose. But because you identify with them, they control you. This is why inner chatter feels so personal. You don't say, "I'm having a thought." You say, "This is who I am." And that's where suffering begins. Islam makes a powerful distinction that modern psychology is only now rediscovering. You're not your thoughts. You are the observer of them. When you understand this, everything shifts. Overthinking loses its authority, because thoughts only dominate when you follow them. Most people don't overthink because they have deep minds. They overthink because they haven't learned how to anchor themselves. So the mind floats freely, jumping from past to future without rest. Anchoring is what stops inner chaos. And anchoring doesn't mean suppressing thoughts. It means giving the mind a place to return to. In psychology, this is grounding. In Islam, this is remembrance. When Allah tells you to remember Him often, it's not only spiritual advice, it's mental regulation, because remembrance pulls the mind out of spirals and into presence. It interrupts the loop. Overthinking thrives in the past and future. Peace lives only in the present. That's why prayer feels calming even when life isn't fixed, because prayer pulls your awareness back to now. Back to breath, back to body, back to meaning. The mind quiets not because problems disappear, but because attention shifts. Here's the truth people don't like to hear. You can't think your way out of overthinking. Thinking more about thoughts only feeds the loop. The exit is not more analysis. It's awareness. The moment you notice I'm spiraling, you're already outside the spiral, because awareness creates space. And space creates relief. Islam teaches something profound here. The heart finds rest not when life is solved, but when reliance shifts. Overthinking is often a control issue. Your mind is trying to guarantee safety by predicting everything, but certainty was never promised. So the mind exhausts itself trying to achieve the impossible. When you surrender control, not passively but consciously, the noise softens. You stop demanding answers for everything. You stop interrogating the future. You stop punishing yourself for the past. This doesn't mean you stop planning. It means you stop obsessing. There's a difference. Overthinking says, I must figure this out now or everything will collapse. Peace says, I'll take the next right step and trust the rest. One posture drains you, the other steadies you. This is why people who trust deeply often appear calm. Not because life is easier for them, but because their minds aren't fighting reality. Overthinking is resistance. Peace is acceptance with effort. When your mind starts racing, ask yourself one question. Is this thought useful right now? If not, let it pass. You don't argue with clouds in the sky. You don't chase them. You watch them move. Thoughts are the same. They only trap you when you cling. Silencing the mind doesn't happen through force. It happens through gentleness, through repetition, through returning again and again to something stable. For some, that's breath. For some, that's prayer. For some, that's remembrance. The method matters less than the direction. You're teaching your mind where to rest, and rest is a skill, not a personality trait. You weren't born overthinking. You learned it, which means you can unlearn it. Slowly, patiently, without self-judgment. Inner peace isn't the absence of thoughts. It's the absence of fear toward them, and once that fear dissolves, the noise naturally fades. Not because life became simple, but because your mind stopped fighting itself. Here's the part no one wants to admit. A lot of people secretly like overthinking, not because it feels good, but because it gives them a sense of importance. Overthinking makes you feel deep. It makes you feel complex. It makes you feel like someone who sees more than others. So letting go feels like losing an identity. If your mind went quiet tomorrow, who would you be without the noise? For many people, inner chatter has become companionship. The voice in your head talks to you more than anyone else does. So silence feels lonely. That's why some people panic the moment their mind slows down. They immediately reach for their phone. They turn on a video. They fill the space. Because stillness forces a confrontation. And not everyone is ready for it. Another uncomfortable truth. Overthinking is often disguised avoidance. You think you're processing, but you're actually postponing action. You replay conversations instead of having difficult ones. You analyze your purpose instead of committing to a direction. You think about healing instead of sitting with pain. Thinking feels productive, but sometimes it's just fear wearing a smarter outfit. And modern culture rewards this. You're praised for being in your head, for being analytical, for being hyper-aware, but no one tells you the cost. The cost is presence. The cost is peace. The cost is joy that doesn't depend on outcomes. Islam challenges this directly. It doesn't glorify endless mental loops. It calls excessive rumination what it is, a burden the heart was never meant to carry. That's why reliance is emphasized so strongly, because a mind that tries to carry everything alone will eventually collapse. Here's something controversial. Not every thought deserves respect. Some thoughts deserve dismissal. But we've been taught to treat every thought as meaningful. So we sit with thoughts that were never meant to stay. Thoughts born from fear, from insecurity, from comparison, from ego. And then we wonder why we feel overwhelmed. Silencing the mind sometimes means saying, "This thought doesn't get to lead me." That's not suppression, that's discernment. Another thing people don't talk about. Overthinking can become a form of self-punishment. You replay mistakes to make sure you never forget them. You mentally criticize yourself to stay in check. You don't allow peace because you don't think you've earned it yet. But peace is not a reward for perfection. It's a requirement for growth. Islam never tells you to torture yourself mentally to become better. It teaches accountability, not cruelty. Reflection, not obsession. And mercy, especially toward yourself. Here's the hardest truth. If you wait for your mind to be quiet before you live, you'll never live. The mind doesn't calm down before action. It calms down through aligned action. When you move with intention, the noise reduces. When you delay, it multiplies. This is why people who finally take a step, even an imperfect one, feel relief. Not because the problem vanished, but because the mind stopped circling. Motion grounds the mind. So does trust. So does prayer. So does remembering that you were never meant to carry tomorrow today. A quiet mind is not a luxury. It's not reserved for monks or mystics. It's the natural state of a heart that knows where to return. And the moment you stop fighting your thoughts and start orienting your life around something stable, the noise loses its grip. Not instantly, but inevitably. There is something else people don't want to confront. Overthinking is often mistaken for intelligence. If your mind is always active, people assume you are deep, self-aware, emotionally intelligent. But mental noise is not depth. Depth is clarity. A calm mind can see further than a loud one, yet many people are afraid of clarity because clarity demands responsibility. When you see clearly, you can no longer hide behind confusion. You can no longer say, I don't know what I want. You do know. You just don't want to face the consequences of choosing it. So the mind stays busy. Because confusion feels safer than commitment. Another uncomfortable truth. A lot of inner chatter comes from living out of alignment. When your actions don't match your values, the mind protests. It whispers at first, then it nags. Then it screams, not because it wants to hurt you, but because it wants you to notice. This is why people feel mentally exhausted after pretending all day, pretending to be okay, pretending to care about things they don't, pretending to be someone they are not. The mind was never designed to carry false versions of you. That friction creates noise. Islam speaks clearly about this inner dissonance. A heart that is divided cannot be at rest. When you live for approval, the mind calculates endlessly. When you live for purpose, the mind settles. Overthinking thrives on comparison. Who's ahead? Who's behind? Who's winning? Comparison multiplies inner chatter because it shifts your reference point outward. You stop listening inward. And when you outsource your sense of worth, your mind never shuts up because the world never stops judging. Silence begins when your worth is no longer negotiable. When it's anchored in something stable, that's why remembrance calms the mind. It recenters you. It reminds you that you are seen even when no one is watching, that you are valued even when unproductive, that you matter even in stillness. Here's another controversial idea. Some people don't want peace, they want control. Peace requires surrender. Control requires constant monitoring. If your mind is always running, ask yourself, what am I afraid will happen if I let go? Usually, the answer is loss. Loss of identity. Loss of certainty. Loss of imagined control. But control was always an illusion. The mind is loud when it tries to replace trust. And no amount of thinking will ever make life predictable. This is why people who trust deeply, spiritually or otherwise, feel lighter. Not because they know more, but because they accept more. Acceptance is not weakness. It's psychological maturity. It's the decision to stop fighting reality and start working with it. The mind quiets when resistance ends. And resistance ends when you stop demanding guarantees. You don't need to silence your mind forever. You need moments of return. Moments where you step out of the noise and remember, I am here. I am breathing. This moment is enough. Those moments stack. And slowly, the inner chatter loses power. Not because you defeated it, but because you outgrew it.